And that is about Bill Ackman. You may have noticed on that thumbnail, he is next to Jeffrey Epstein. Now, recently, I talked about Bill Ackman's involvement in pressuring Harvard, MIT, and the University of Pennsylvania to basically change their free speech policies, to resign and to condemn the protests that have come from the students in reference to supporting the Palestinian people. He's also the one that said from the river to the sea, an intifada was calling for the elimination of Jewish people. I've told you before that is not the case. But then someone sent me something. Someone sent me something else about Bill Ackman that I don't think people knew, how he has also pressured these colleges before, and that is in reference to Jeffrey Epstein. Oh, honey, get ready. We got the tea tonight. We're first going to get into this interview that he had recently with David Rubenstein about anti-Semitism on campus. Let's start with this, and then we're going to go to the Epstein situation, because I'm going to make a connection here.
One of the institutions you've been very philanthropic with is your alma mater, Harvard. But recently, you've been very public about your criticism of the way Harvard handled the events of October 7th and their aftermath. Could you talk about that now?
The first reaction of a group of 34 Harvard student clubs on the morning after October 7th was to put out a statement saying that Israel was 100% responsible for the acts of Hamas. And my view on that was, that's ridiculous, and that's more than ridiculous, I would say. And these students need to have some, judgment and perspective. You can come out and say, look, I'm very unhappy about Israel's treatment of Palestinians in the West Bank, or you can say, we can talk about the Gaza Strip, but you can't support terrorists, and particularly terrorists that rape and pillage and murder and burn.
Pause here for a second. So let me tell you something here. Here is Bill trying to tell you what you can say. This guy who claims to be pro free speech, he's another one that said he was against censorship, but yet he's trying to tell people what they can and cannot say. He goes on to say that you can say that you have an issue with the way that Israel has handled the West Bank and all that stuff. But why isn't Bill saying that? Why isn't Bill talking about that side of the story? Why is he only talking about what happened October 7th? Ask yourself that question. This guy is a billionaire, hedge fund guy. There's different types of billionaires. Some of them are inventors, but this guy didn't invent shit. He's basically just making money off of someone else's money. That's it. That's it. Let's go on.
Burn and take hostages. Well, I got a text from a CEO in my industry. He's like, Bill, the people at Harvard. I'd like to know who the students are behind these clubs, so I make sure I don't inadvertently hire them. And so I tweeted out that sort of made that point.
I don't think they would want to work for you, Bill. The ego of this guy, the ego. Let me know who the students are so I don't hire them. What makes you think they want to work with you?
And caused a bit of a firestorm, and I got a lot of pushback. Why are you picking on students? I said, look, you can't hide behind a corporate entity if you're going to support terrorism. That's a major decision. So that was sort of my first initiative, if you will, at Harvard. And then, there were protests on campus, and the protests were supportive of terrorism and supportive of things like, when you have a group of students shouting "Intifada, Intifada," let's free Palestine and from the river to the sea. The meaning of Intifada means to kill Jews.
No, it does not. The meaning of that means to resist. So you see, he started a lot of this. This is what I was telling you guys. This guy has a lot of followers on Twitter. He was the one that got the ball rolling. And here he is blatantly lying. Free Palestine doesn't call for the elimination of Jewish people. Free Palestine means call for the elimination of the oppression and occupation of the Palestinian people. He knows this. This guy is not stupid. Why is he telling this lie? I'm going to show you.
Raised this issue, Harvard said, well, we have a commitment to free speech, and that's why we have to allow this. Well, there's certain speech that is certainly permissible under the First Amendment. And then there's certain speech that I would say is undesirable on a campus.
Have you said you're not going to donate to Harvard anymore? Or have you said, I'm not going to hire people from these Harvard students anymore, or people like those people?
No. Well, one, we're not going to hire anyone that supports terrorism at Pershing Square. I haven't made any statements.
Remember what he said. We're not going to hire anyone who supports terrorism, right? Okay, because I'm going to show you what he supported.
Statements about, economic support for Harvard. I want Harvard to do the right thing. I don't want to threaten one way or another. That's not my kind of approach. But I do think Harvard needs to do a deep examination of, one, there's been a meaningful rise in anti-Semitic incidents on campus.
So you're going to continue to be involved in this issue and try to push Harvard to do what you think they should be doing.
So he says there's a rise of anti-Semitism on campus, totally leaves out that there were Palestinian students that were shot in Burlington, Vermont. You see what he's doing?
Absolutely. I wrote a pretty thoughtful letter that was, I think 25 million people saw it on Twitter. And remarkably, I did not get a response, which to me is a very, very bad and weak approach. Literally no response, no acknowledgement, no, dear Bill, I hear what you're saying, but nothing. So
why do they owe you a response? Why do they owe him a response? You know how many times, how many letters Harvard receives? You know how many people write to Harvard or write to the president of these universities? But Bill somehow believes that he, out of all the letters that come across their desk, he is owed a response because he's a Harvard alum, because he's a billionaire. How dare you ignore the letter that I wrote you? Out of all those 500 letters that you probably receive a day, how dare you not respond to my letter?
So, yes, I'm an activist, but my activism today is probably not in the corporate boardroom. It's on campus, and this is not just a Harvard problem. And it's an NYU problem. It's a University of Pennsylvania problem. The more I examine the issue, the more woke, the more left-leaning the institution, the more anti-Semitism, which is a very unfortunate thing.
One of the institutions.
See what people have done? This is why we tried to warn you guys about this over at RBN, how people were using this woke word too much and they were overusing it. Now it's gotten to the point where they can say anything is woke, right? Okay. He told you he is now an activist on campus. So see, he's trying to get to the student. He's trying to get to them when they're young. Let me go ahead and indoctrinate them now before they get out into corporate America. Let me reach them while they're in school. Okay. So Bill Ackman also apparently was trying to tell MIT what to do when it was announced that Jeffrey Epstein was arrested. Oh, honey, we got the receipts tonight. Look at this. Someone sent this to me. The last email Bill Ackman wrote to MIT was advising them to please try to obscure his wife's relationship to Jeffrey Epstein. Why are all these people connected? You got RFK, Jeffrey Epstein. Bill Ackman donates to RFK's campaign. You got Bill Ackman connected to Jeffrey Epstein. Why are all these people connect? Let's look at the email. Because Eric blew this up so we can see it a little bit better. Because I want you to read through this with me. We're going to all follow along. I used to tell this to the students, let's follow along. Here's the email from William Ackman, that's him, to Neri Oxman, that's his wife. And the CC here is Joy Ito. We'll get into who Joy Ito was. Remember, guys, I worked at MIT. So we're about to get into some of this. This was August 20th, 2019. Joy Neri forwarded your email to me. I would please ask that you copy me on all Epstein-related communications going forward, as I and members of my legal and communication teams are working to help her. And Neri already has enough on her plate breastfeeding a 3-month-old baby. A very beautiful one, I might add, without a baby nurse until early September. Oh, dear God, you ain't got no baby nurse. He mentions this as though women haven't been doing this for years with no baby nurse, no nanny, no nothing. I'm a special case. Forward all Epstein-related communications to me. Our advice on handling the recent press requests. Now here is Bill Ackman trying to tell MIT what to say to the press. I would suggest that on background that you let the press know that Epstein did not receive a disobedience award, but he, like other donors to the lab, and the donor names were redacted here, although I would, of course, not mention their names, received a gift from the Media Lab of a unique design object. I don't think it is necessary for you to say it was at your request, which, as I understand in this case, it was. But it is very important that you don't mention Neri's name. You guys hear this? Billionaire telling Joy Ito from MIT's Media Lab, when the press comes to you to talk about Jeffrey Epstein and his arrest, don't mention my wife's name. Or otherwise get her involved, or she will have to issue her own statement to protect her reputation, explaining why it was sent and at whose request, who else received similar gifts, how she met Epstein, who else at MIT received funding from Epstein, why she declined to attend meetings and dinners with Epstein, which other faculty attended. That sounds like a threat to me. Don't mention Neri's name, or else she's going to tell on these other people. Is this blackmail? This will, of course, blow this up even more, which we would certainly not like to see happen. Although I don't think it's necessary to mention this. According to Neri, the gift Epstein received differed from the disobedience award, as it had going on to page 2. That's why I asked Eric to blow this up, because I wanted you guys to be able to read this along with me. As it had a different base, the orb had a different pattern, and it did not come with a certificate, among other differences. The fact that Neri, as the designer of the Media Lab, was asked to produce nearly all, if not all, physical gifts for donors, using her and her students' time and resources at either your or Raphael's office, Nina or Jess' request, is not a good reason for Neri to be outed as the supplier to Epstein. Raphael was the president of MIT at that time. That's who he's referring to there. Because of Neri's profile, her upcoming MoMA show, and the large amount of recent media about her, she would be an appealing target for the press, as I'm sure you understand. Ain't this some shit? Listen to this. To be clear, Neri's interests are not adverse to you, the Media Lab, or MIT, but I don't want to see her forced into a position where, to protect her name, she is required to be transparent about everything that took place at MIT with Epstein. What took place at MIT with Epstein? What's he talking about? Once her name appears in the press, she will face a barrage of questions, and anything other than perfect transparency to the media will make her look like she is hiding something. This has regretfully become a witch hunt, as I'm sure you already understand. Neary has nothing to hide about the Epstein situation, but would rather stay quiet unless she is forced to do otherwise. We will be on a flight beginning at 10:30 Eastern until 7 p.m., but I am reachable before if you would like to discuss this further or possibly by email during the flight. Thank you, Bill. Now, let's talk about Joi Ito. Joi Ito, he's a Japanese entrepreneur and venture capitalist. He is the president of the Chiba Institute of Technology, and he is the former director of the MIT Media Lab, former professor of practice of media arts and sciences at MIT, and a former visiting professor of practice at Harvard Law School. So he did step down when this came out. He stepped down following the exposure of his personal and professional financial ties to sex offender and financier Jeffrey Epstein. Ito resigned from his role at MIT, Harvard, the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, the Knight Foundation, Pure Tech Health, and the New York Times Company on September 7th, 2019. So he was even part of the press. Let's go back and remind you what happened. Okay. MIT investigates alleged connection to Jeffrey Epstein. Listen to this. I just want to take you back. Because, see, I remember all of this.
In the latest fallout connected to Jeffrey Epstein, MIT is opening an investigation into its ties to the financier and convicted sex offender. The announcement came just one day after the New Yorker revealed that MIT's Media Lab was attempting to conceal donations from Epstein. The school had previously said it accepted $800,000 from his foundations over a 20-year period. But according to the magazine, the director of MIT's Media Lab, Joi Ito, had accepted nearly $2 million from Epstein without properly reporting it. Following the bombshell report, the university's president announced Ito's resignation and described accepting Epstein's donations as a, quote, mistake of judgment. NBC News spoke to Signe Swenson, a former MIT employee who said she resigned in 2016 in part because of her discomfort about the lab's relationship with Epstein.
You see this, guys? You see what's coming out? See, I don't think everybody saw this at that time. Again, I worked at MIT, so I knew a little bit more I heard about the story more often in reference to Epstein and MIT because it's local news to me. But this is very telling. The woman that's coming on now, she resigned in 2016 because she was uncomfortable with the relationship that they had with Jeffrey Epstein. A lot of people were uncomfortable. Bill Gates' wife said she was uncomfortable. You know, people just not uncomfortable for no reason.
In my first position working at MIT, part of my job was to research the prospects for the top-rated donors or potential donors to MIT. And I looked at Epstein's record, found his conviction, but at that time he was not somebody MIT was supposedly actively cultivating. So
just remember, Jeffrey Epstein at this point had already been convicted before. That was a prior conviction. So they still chose to do business with him even after that.
So I just made note of it. But then when I started conversations with the MIT Media Lab about the position that I was applying for, it was explained to me that Joi Ito and Jeffrey Epstein had an existing relationship, and that part of my job would be to help aid that relationship along. At many points, and probably nearly every time his name was brought up, I expressed my disgust and discomfort, but it was never my choice or truly anybody's choice but Joi Ito to me.
And they worked with him anyway.
Maintain this relationship. We were expected to keep this quiet at every turn, involving as few people as possible.
Why were they asked to keep it quiet? If there was nothing wrong about it, why were they told to keep it quiet?
He was referred to by just his initials, sometimes a pseudonym, but in general, we were just supposed to avoid other people learning about this. The visit where he came to the lab, we were expected to keep off books as much as possible. Those with money and those with power apparently don't suffer consequences. That specifically in academia and nonprofits all over, people bend over backwards. They look the other way when people are saying or doing terrible things because the money's good. The money will come in.
So one thing I want to mention as well, how do you keep this off the books, right? When Raphael made the statement after Jeffrey Epstein was convicted the second time, when he made that statement, he gave a big speech, press conference at MIT. He said at the time he was an anonymous donor, but they all knew. If you go back and read the email that Bill sent to Joy Ito, you can tell that they all knew. It wasn't anonymous. He mentioned Raphael's name in the email. So that was Raphael lying to the public saying, oh, it was an anonymous donor. We didn't really know. He did know. They all knew.
Signe Swenson's former boss Jochi Ito, previously apologized, saying, I take full responsibility for my error in judgment, and said that he saw no evidence of Epstein's alleged criminal actions. Ito has not responded to our request for comment.
Of course he didn't. And by the way, all you had to do was look it up. Like I said, that was a previous conviction there. But let me show you something else here about Bill Ackman, right? See, watch this. This is where I get him on the free speech issue as well. Bill Ackman called Kyle Rittenhouse a civic-minded patriot who acted in self-defense. So let me ask you a question. So first of all, Kyle Rittenhouse was protecting property that night. We talked about this on RBN. He was protecting property. Billionaires like to have property protected, right? Whether you feel like he shouldn't have been there, whatever, etc. One thing they were able to prove in court is they said, well, the people came after him first and he acted in self-defense. However, why is it that Bill Ackman felt that it was okay for Kyle Rittenhouse to defend himself, and so much to the point where he will call him a civic-minded patriot, but he's out here on Twitter and going into these interviews calling the students that are protesting for the Palestinian people, he's calling them thugs. They haven't shot anybody. They haven't assaulted anybody, but they're thugs, according to Bill Ackman. A little bit here, you'll see. Ackman is no stranger to controversy in the financial world. As a shareholder activist, his New York-based firm takes stakes in companies and then often pressures their leaders to make changes or face proxy fights. Pershing Square has almost $22 billion in assets under management, including a special purpose acquisition company and other funds, according to the firm's website. Here's that tweet here where he called him a civic-minded patriot. So Kyle Rittenhouse can shoot people and he's a patriot, but you can't walk down the street in a march and say free Palestine. You're a thug. Censored Man made the connection. Epstein and Israel. Look at this. Here you have an ex-Mossad agent, Ben Menench, confirmed that both Jeffrey Epstein and his partner in crime, Ghislaine Maxwell, worked for the government of Israel. Their job, blackmailing American politicians, hedge fund managers, and bank managers. Bill's hedge fund. Did they have something on Bill? I don't know. I don't know if Bill was on that island. I don't know if Bill was on that plane. I have no evidence or receipts to prove that. But it makes you wonder. It goes on to say hedge fund managers and bank managers were top priority as they were the donor class and could have politicians alter policy. Because, as we all know, corrupt politicians like nothing more than money. Now you understand why the U.S. is so pro-Israel. Epstein would also finance universities, which I just showed you, primarily targeting their research and experimental development R&D sectors. He would do this because often universities would cooperate with the private sector on new science and technology. This is true. Epstein would gather this information and give it to Israel. This is why Israel's influence on America is so great. Everybody making the connection now? This is something also that Whitney Webb has also spoken about. Israel literally used child abuse in order to influence both U.S. domestic and foreign policy. Jeffrey Epstein, the world's most infamous pedophile, was a tool used by the Israeli government. Is this really a nation you want to support? Again, this is not about Jewish people. This is about the government. Furthermore, a client list compiled by, let me hover over this here, Rye Liberty, who researched Epstein and his clients more than anyone, lists 4 former prime ministers of Israel. Every name on that list with the flag next to them was once the head of their nation. 4 prime ministers of Israel, 1 prime minister of the UK, 1 president of the United States, 21 billionaires. And Bill is one of those billionaires. Epstein had the world's most powerful people compromised. And all of this was so that Israel gained more and more power over some of the world's most influential people. Glenn Greenwald called it out as well. The way some people are drooling in gratitude over Bill Ackman using his multi-billion hedge fund wealth to help create no hire blacklist for college students who criticize Israel and dictate to colleges which views they may and may not permit to be heard is creepy. And yes, look at this. People on the right who now see Bill Ackman as a hero might want to look into his role in aggressively promoting lockdowns in March of 2020 and then allegedly reaping profits from the resulting collapse. This should have more likes. It has over 541.4K views. I'm suspicious that it has only that amount of likes. Investor Bill Ackman advises Trump to shut down the country, saying stock market will soar. And actually, Bill Ackman is one of the billionaires that actually was able to increase his wealth during the pandemic. This is why I say you can't have heroes. So for the people out there praising this guy, RFK Jr., this is your friend? Is this your king? Same guy out here promoting lockdown so that he could benefit financially? Is this your king? The point is, these billionaires and some of these millionaires, not all of the millionaires, but these billionaires, they all moved in the same circle, guys. And the circle always seems to come right back to Jeffrey Epstein. Billionaires run this country. They've been running other countries. And Bill Ackman is one of them. A hedge fund manager should not be able to reach into the university and tell employees of the university what to say to the press. So for all the people that still support RFK Jr., ask him if this is his king.